Nuove idee intorno al project management e agli ultimi trend su carriera, innovazione e business agility. Questo è Project Management on the Go, il podcast del PMI Northern Italy Chapter.
Benvenuti a tutti e bentornati per chi già ci ascolta. Sono Valerio Casalini, project leader dei podcast del Northern Italy Chapter del PMI. Questo è un episodio davvero speciale perché abbiamo un ospite d'eccezione, il presidente e CEO del PMI, la nostra associazione, Pierre Le Manh. È un episodio speciale anche perché a intervistare Pierre non sarò io, ma sarà la presidente del nostro chapter, Giusy Meloni. Lascio quindi subito la parola a Giusy per introdurre l'episodio e presentare Pierre.
Grazie Valerio, and thank you Pierre for being with us today. Let's
Thank you,
start with
Josie.
you. Is there anything about yourself that you particularly wish to share with our audience today?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Josie. I want to congratulate you, first of all, for what you're doing for PMI. You know, we have, I think, almost 100 volunteers in our PMI Northern Italy chapter, and you've been very successful. You know, I look at the size of the chapters. You have about, I think, over 2,500 active members at this point,
Yes.
and also the highest retention rate in Europe. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Yes, we are.
it's a fantastic testament to the quality of your events and how your community is united and strong. So I want to congratulate you for that and thank you. So you wanted me to, asking me if I could share something personal. You know, I used to struggle a lot and actually fear any question about myself. I was a very shy child. And I remember, by the way, when I was a child, I played the piano and I had those events where a gala day every year, right, where I would have to play in front of the entire audience, and I was terrorized, right? I hated that. I was a good musician, right? So it never went wrong, but I still remember to this day with terror those moments when I had to stand up, go, and I didn't even have to speak, you know, just play. Then after that, I joined a rock band as a teenager, so that helped me a little bit because I could express myself a little more freely, maybe. But yes, it took me many years, and even to this day, talking about myself is not very easy. You know, I came from a very large family. My father was born and grew up in Vietnam. He came to France when he was already in his 20s to study, met with my mom, who's French. But through my dad, I have such a global family because, you know, many people from Vietnam either stayed in Vietnam, depending on whether they were in the north or the south at the end of the war, and others left. So I have family in Vietnam, I have family in Australia, I have family in the US, I have family in Europe. One of my sons lives in London. So I come from a very global family, but very strangely, I only went to Italy for the first time in my early 20s. It's a strange thing to say, but although I grew up in France and I was in France, I only went to Italy for the first time working for Accenture. But I had a lot of interest for Italy, mostly through football, I think, and culture. But I was sent to work on an assignment for a company called Merloni. Merloni is a company,
Yes.
that produces, manufactures wash machines, and you know them, right? Indesit, those brands. Yep. And then I had another, because it worked very well. It went very well. I had another assignment with Gruppo Ferruzzi. So they were at the time, you know, they got dismantled, but I was working for the big trading division as a consultant. So later after that, I spent a lot of time in Italy. So I developed this interest working with Italians and in Italy. And from a personal standpoint, I then started to go to Italy every summer. My children still talk about their childhood. During vacations, we were visiting churches in Italy with dad. That's how they talk about it. And later I joined a company. I ran a company that got sold to Telecom Italia. So that's when I learned to speak Italian. We're doing this in English because I'm not particularly used to speak about PMI and project management in Italian. But at the time I had to work as part of the management team of division of Telecom Italia, right? So I learned a lot working with Italians. And now it's interesting because I've lived in the US for 11 years. And, in the US, people tell you they're Italian. Say, oh, I'm Italian. So I say, okay. And I start talking to them in Italian and they don't speak Italian. They just mean, they have they're
Yes.
very proud of their Italian origins. Anyway, so that was the personal thing I wanted to share with you. Italy is very close to my heart, although it's a love that developed a little later than in my childhood. But in the last 30 years, I've constantly been close to Italy. I'm really happy that you asked me to be part of your podcast today.
Thank you again, Pierre. And we'll have to find a way to get you here again soon, I would
Yes,
say.
I will come.
Let's get to project management now. What future do you envision for project management as a profession and as managerial discipline? Tough question.
First, the profession is in very high demand. We have these reports that we publish every year. One of them last year, or actually 2 years ago, was about the talent gap that exists in project management worldwide. So we estimated the need for project professionals at 25 million more than the ones we have today between 2020 and 2030. So during this decade, 25 million, half of it more or less, right? Half of it is to replace the ones that will retire, especially in the most mature markets, and half just because of the growth in demand. It is a worldwide phenomenon, of course, quite driven by Asia and the Middle East when it comes to the new growth, right? New positions. But in the most developed markets or mature markets, we have a lot of replacement needs also. So that will still drive demand for more project professionals everywhere. So that's one thing. The second thing that I think is important to recognize is that the world needs heavy transformation. There's a lot that needs to be done in terms of climate change, of course, in terms of digitalization. If you look at AI, for instance, which is the topic of the day, right? But it's also the topic of the next decade. In 2022, there was already $100 billion worldwide of private investment, not public investment, private investment in AI. And that was in 2022. So it's going to explode going forward. We're talking about a lot of investments and projects and transformation covering all sectors from healthcare to security to e-commerce, fintech, manufacturing, defense, everything. So that's another area where I feel the world will heavily transform. And then there's this aspiration to a different model for societies that I think is very pervasive. The level of pervasiveness is not exactly the same in all regions and countries, but definitely in many of the emerging markets, and of course in Europe, there is this aspiration to a different model, which will require heavy transformation as well, because it means transforming the structures of society, transforming the way power is shared, the way leadership is exercised, the goals of corporations, the way politics work as well. So there's a massive demand there. And I see those three things combined, of course, with the demographic shifts that we're seeing, drive an enormous need for transformation. By the way, maybe even our projections of the number of project professionals who are needed to do that is underestimated. It's very possible that there are projections that are a bit conservative. None of that will be done. None of this transformation will be done without project professionals. Like, I don't know how anyone would think of transforming without having people in charge of these transformations, one project at a time, one program at a time. So I see enormous opportunity for us. It will require a lot of reinvention, by the way, the world as we think about it in the future, to fight climate change, to leverage AI in a positive way, to develop a different society model. That will require a lot of reinvention. The good news, in my opinion, is that project professionals are very good natural learners. I've been very impressed since I've joined PMI, by the way, because I worked with project professionals before, of course, but I had never fully realized how much project people learn. They read, they want to know new things. They're very curious intellectually. That should position us, I think, the profession, or put us in a very good place to sort of break the glass ceiling for the profession, right? These opportunities are there. They are essential to the world. They are essential to leaders, and the project professionals are the people who can actually make this happen, right? So that's our opportunity to break this glass ceiling. Too often, project managers are the people in the room who know but don't say anything. That has to change. We can lead the movement to transform the world by having successful projects and hopefully use that power to make it a better world.
What you said brings to mind a comment that a very a young person said to me once, because I was trying to explain what I did, you know how difficult it is sometimes to express what you do for what's your job, if you don't have a specific role or something which is known. And sometimes project management is not known enough as a profession. And her comment was, "Oh, but what you're talking about is actually living, is about life." I said, "Well, in a sense, yes. What we do is actually making, as we say now in PMI, making reality." In the framework that you just sketched, the next question comes quite natural. In your vision, what is the role the PMI will play as a global professional association?
PMI was created in 1969 so that a few companies represented by very experienced people, professionals, but it was created so a few companies share best practices and solutions to problems that they had in common. It was not even about the people at the very beginning. It was really about, we have similar issues in our day-to-day jobs. How can we put our ideas together and see how we can develop better practices? And later came the growing community, which we smartly at the time structured into chapters, which gave us the PMI, I think, has a lot of strength because of that structure that others may not have. Later came the publication, the standards, the accredited certifications, all the ecosystem of training partners, the relationship with the academia, with governments, and more recently, the e-learning side of PMI. And of course, because the world globalized, people of our generation have seen that, right? I remember when I started to work, we were still at the very early stage of this globalization. We talked about it, but now we've seen 30 years later how different the world is. Because we've been pretty good through our chapter network at, in fact, living or growing along with this globalization, we have become the largest professional organization in the world for project management by a very large margin. But I think we focus sometimes a little too much on the size, and we really have to remember what is our core purpose. Why are we there? And we are there because we want to increase project success. That's what we do. And we do that because successful projects transform the world. That's our purpose. And I do want PMI to put itself on the line, with all project people, with all project managers, with all project professionals, to increase project success rate. If we don't increase project success rate, then it's going to be difficult for change to happen. Things won't improve, and then the world won't transform the way it should to meet the challenges that we talked about earlier. So I believe that as a global organization, everything we do, from the knowledge we create together with our volunteers, to our thought leadership, from our learning products, to all the leadership development opportunities that we provide, through our chapters, like you do all the time, through our events, everything we do from our support to NGOs by helping them manage their own projects more successfully, implement an EPMO structure, or even maintaining a gold standard in professional certifications. Everything we do has to serve this purpose of increasing project success. So we help together as a community of tens of millions of people, of tens of millions of project professionals, one project at a time. We help transform the world, reinvent a better world, more sustainable, more equitable, with less waste of resources, time, talent, money, ideas. So that's the way or the direction in which I want to lead PMI. And in practice, I know it will take a lot. It means focusing our resources, our research, our thought leadership, our products on better understanding of what is driving project success. Be more intentional and powerful in amplifying the enormous knowledge that is cultivated within our global community and the experience that people can bring on to the table every time they meet and network and publish content, go to our projectmanagement.com site and participate to our virtual communities, run workshops. But also, of course, PMI has to be an advocate for the profession. And beyond the profession itself, we need to explain to business leaders why being qualified as a project professional is so important to project success, and that just like you cannot be a great politician if you've never done it before, you need to learn your craft. It's the same with project. And if the world has to be transformed, and leaders always talk about transformation, then they need qualified project professionals. And we have to really be the advocate of this profession and the professional skills that go with being a project professional. The last thing I would like to add on that is that we also, maybe I don't want people to believe that because I'm talking about project success, I only see isolated projects, right? That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking also about the systemic factors that drive project success. And that goes way beyond the management of a single project. It's the environment in which you work. It's the culture. It's the even portfolio management, PMOs, enterprise agility, the leadership that is required to transform, right? So we have to also play a role in that.
It's always part of basically any project, but I have to say that one successful project at a time is a very, 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 very powerful message. You know, it makes powerful and a good vision for the future, a good point of view for the future.
You know, we're working right now with the executive team and the board of PMI on the next iteration of our strategy. And that includes, of course, working a little bit on our purpose, our vision, our mission. So I'm kind of testing a little bit some ideas on you.
Okay. Glad to.
Thanks for the feedback.
It's very powerful. It gives the idea that everything matters and that we can all make the difference. The other thing that comes to mind for me is one sentence by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said, if you think you're too small to do something, try sleeping with a mosquito in the room.
That's a good one.
It's a good one, isn't it? Anyway, let's get a little bit closer to Europe. Do you think there are any specific threats or opportunities we need to take into consideration for the future of project management here in our region?
Well, we all know the challenges that Europe is facing, low growth, demographic challenges that cannot be addressed through immigration very easily because of all the challenges that, in Italy, you're well placed to know that. So all the national and cultural identity issues. And I'm saying that because yesterday I was thinking a little bit about Italy, and Italy has a population of around 60 million people, right? So I don't know, it's maybe a little less than that, but about that. 60 million people is the number of people that were added to the US population since 2000. And I'm saying this because sometimes people tend to see the US as the same as Western Europe, but it's not, right? It's still growing as a higher growth rate. And that's in part because demography is different. And even if immigration has been a problem in the US as well, it has still helped to keep growing from a demographic perspective. And Europe has this massive problem. And it's not just the US. When you think about Africa, I was in Africa 2 weeks ago, and so I worked a little bit on the numbers and tried to understand that region a bit better. And one number really struck me. So there are currently 750 million people in the workforce in Africa. By 2050, they will have 1.5 billion. So it will have doubled. And 2050 is not that far off. Like it's, 25 years from now, a little more. So it's going to come pretty quickly. And 750 million more, 1.5 billion people in the active workforce in Africa, when by 2050, even the workforce in China would have started to decline, right? Of course, in Europe, it started to decline before. We talked about that earlier, but it's kind of stagnating in North and Latin America. But it will still grow in Asia, outside of China to an extent. But Africa, for instance, is going to be enormous, right? So if we don't help Africa create the quality jobs for these people, what do we think is going to happen, right? So we cannot see the problem of Europe in isolation, right? Europe has to play a bigger role in the world. And the solution to that is to have a more unified Europe. And we know it's been very, very difficult to implement. And we're actually, if anything, maybe moving backwards to an extent. And I remember, I already talked about what the world was 30 years ago, but I'm going to do it once more. In 1992 is when I think we announced the European Union to the world, like the Maastricht, remember? Yep. So at the time, I remember, because I worked for the US company at the time, I remember that in the US, everybody thought, oh, we got a new, massive, formidable global competitor, and they were scenario planning and running risk assessment sessions and all of that. It's sad to think that 30 years later, nobody in the world cares about it and even thinks about it. It's all about the US, China, bipolar world, and a few regional powers that are more or less uncontrollable. But Europe, unfortunately, has a little bit disappeared as a threat from an economic standpoint, and it's not really respected anymore because of that. So I don't have a solution to unify Europe, but I really think Europeans have to move beyond their differences and realize that they have much more in common than things that differentiate them in a way.
Yeah.
It's a sad outcome that the UK left Europe, but it is what it is, and we have to live with it. When I look at the $100 billion of private investment in AI in 2022, 60% of that roughly was made in the US and China only. 60%. It's actually 45 in the US, 15 in China. Together, these two economies represent 40% of the economy, right? World economy or global economy. So it's 40% of the global economy, 60% of the investments in AI, which is one of the things that will have the most significant impact. So look, Europe has to really, really, I think, up its game. There are positives in Europe. We know that talent and capital combined drive innovation, right? That's been actually the recipe in the US for a long time. A lot of capital attracting talent thanks to very prestigious universities and then keeping the talents there, making it easy for people to stay. I mean, I became a US citizen pretty easily and quickly, honestly. It's not necessarily as easy for students in Europe to stay, for instance, So we have to harness this combination of talent and capital much better. We have to increase the links between the academic institutions and the corporate world. There is no NASDAQ in France. I see those entrepreneurs from Europe in New York, and I ask them, why did you come here? You have to raise a lot of money to come here because the US market is tough, very competitive. You can't think small. You have to shift your mindset completely when you get to the US. You have to be smart in Europe because it's a complicated market, but in the US, you don't need to be smart. You need to be big and think big, right? So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the concept, right? It's moving from smart to big. But they say, look, we don't have a NASDAQ in Europe. So the only way we can raise a lot of money at one point is to go IPO in the US or in Hong Kong, but nobody wants to go to Hong Kong these days. So all that could be done, right? And Europe needs to do it. What I love with Europe, of course, is that people are aware of where the world is going. I think there's a much better understanding of what is at stake. I was at the Global Compact meeting in New York. Every year there's one horrible week from a traffic standpoint in New York. That's when the United Nations meet, right? The General Assembly of the United Nations. And around that, there's a ton of meetings. So I went to the Global Compact meeting, those SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, and how we're progressing towards the goals. PMI plays a role in that. We're a sponsor and everything, yes. And I was very surprised that in the room, and we had heads of states, we had, of course, the General Secretary came over and very large companies, but it was mostly European people, and some people from other continents as well. So the Europeans can lead, things relative to climate change and lots of the transformations that the world needs. I think the Europeans have this awareness. They have the leadership. We have strong companies in Europe, also leadership in many technologies. There's a lot of support from public opinion that does not necessarily exist here, for instance, in the US. So we have all of that. We have the diversity where Europe is multicultural by definition. People speak multiple languages, or many of them. And that's a huge benefit for project success. Yes. It's not very good in terms of gender equality, though, in terms of project management, right? We have a report issued by PMI I don't know if it's every year, but once in a while, analyzing the gender equality, among other things, right, in project management. And in fact, Europe is actually quite low with only 24% of project management roles held by women. It's 39% in North America, which is not always a model, right? So it's a little late. So I'm counting on you, Josie, to spread the world and attract more.
Okay. Well, we still have a way to go on gender equality in Europe, I would say. But, you mentioned the diversity, which is a strength for Europe. I think is now a time to move from recognizing diversity into inclusion, and that's a difficult step. It's a difficult step for individuals sometimes, and of course it's very difficult for countries. But I consider it a must at this point. And I mentioned something that I'm particularly proud of that our chapter is doing, and we launched it. We've been working on the concept for a year or so, and now we launched it. And it's a program we call the Mediterranean Sea of Culture, where we are gathering together all the countries, all the chapters, all the countries where they have a chapter on the Mediterranean shores. Because what we want to do is to bring back the idea of the little pond, as a sea of culture and not a sea of death, which is what is
Wonderful.
now perceived most of the time. We're launching it in this. The team has just started working, and we have already 6 chapters, and it's already going very well. So you will hear from us about it.
Yes, and make sure we can amplify that, because I think many of the initiatives we have at the chapter level are awesome, and the role of PMI is to amplify it and provide some global visibility to it and resonance.
In 2 of your answers, you did mention something about the rise of AI, and so now I must ask, what the impact you think it will have, artificial intelligence will have on our profession?
First of all, AI has already impacted our profession. Yes. It's been maybe more quietly impacting project work for years, being embedded in a lot of project management software. Think of Jira, Trello, PlanView, the Accenture tools, the IBM tools, the Microsoft tools. So it's a little bit everywhere already for things that have to be done at one point, like assigning team members to tasks or keep track of tasks, produce minutes. I was surprised, by the way, if you go to the projectmanagement.com AI virtual community, so people post questions and others answer and share experiences. And I was surprised to see how many people have been using bots already for a while, to go to meetings instead of them, take minutes, which creates a whole series of potential questions and problems. But it is not that project professionals are discovering AI suddenly because of ChatGPT, but ChatGPT and generative AI has been a seismic shift in the sense that it has completely changed the sense of urgency and made people feel, okay, this is now happening. It's the game-changing event, the stochastic event that raises people's awareness and determination and changes their perception, right? It's like one day we'll have a similar event relative to climate change. It's not going to be a heat wave, but something really big and bad that will make people really start thinking differently and for good, right? Not only talking about it, but really determine them to, or make them determined to act. Sadly, right? Because you would hope it would be better to be able to evolve before something catastrophic happens. But anyway, to come back to AI, so we have currently, based on the research we're running constantly, we have about 91% of project managers who believe that AI will have at least some impact on the profession. We still need to understand why the 9% believe it won't, but you always have contrarians. And senior business leaders think the same, that projects will be impacted by AI. Like 82% of senior leaders believe that AI will have at least some impact on how projects are managed in their own organization in the next 5 years. We also know what project managers or project professionals use AI for right now, right? Reporting, decision support, communication, talent management, resource management, budgeting, and cost management, risk identification and management, all of that. I look at the generative AI overview course that we've put together and launched last week. After less than a week, we have 25,000 registrations already from all around the world. It's a free product. Our goal is to
I've registered. I still have to do it, but I have registered.
Yeah, it's a good course. It takes anywhere between 1 hour and 5 hours to complete, depending on how curious you are, because a lot of that is going through resources, examples, and so you can decide to spend a lot of time or less time, but it gives you a good overview. And I think it will help people get started if they haven't already started to use these tools. It's more about generative AI, right? So it's not the stuff that is embedded in softwares right now. But I think personally that it is a very high stake topic for project professionals, how to use AI tools to increase project success. It's going to be phenomenal if we can unleash that, if we can navigate the risks, it potentially will change the face of the profession and how it is perceived. And that, I think, for two reasons. One, because indeed it can increase success rate, and when you know how much money is spent in projects. PMI came up with this definition of the project economy or projectized industry with a total GDP of $34.5 trillion, right? And a global economy is give or take 100 trillion now, a little less than that. So of course, a fractional increase in project success rates would have already a lot of economic impact, right? And on waste, but also again, on how the world can transform faster for the better. And by the way, I should have said that, but we have run some research in the summer that shows that projects that use AI report a 1.7% higher rate of project success. Ooh. Of course, don't take that number as a rock solid scientific number, but we're seeing already improvements in project success thanks to AI. And we're only at the beginning of the journey, right? So I expect this to grow and we should be able to see real improvement. So that's the first reason why AI is so critical for project professionals, because it will increase the success rate of projects. But also, again, because AI transformation will be everywhere in each organization. And this is the chance of a lifetime for project professionals to lead the AI transformation. And if you're involved in the AI transformation in your organization, you will be seen, you will be visible, you will be important to the senior leadership. I can guarantee that. Right now, only 20% of project managers say that they have extensive or at least good practical experience with AI tools and technology, right? So we have a lot of people who don't. We have to embrace AI. It's going to increase project success rates, and it's going to give us a chance to lead the most important transformations in the organizations that we work for. So PMI has started to provide support. Like I said, we have this tool. We are launching thought leadership pieces. Some of them would be focused on the usage of AI in project management directly. Others would be more focused on AI transformation, right? Because I think it's important that we master both sides as project professionals. And some of the things that we will develop, content, courses, will focus on specific risks and barriers, of course, like, data privacy, ethical concerns, biases, reliability of the outputs, intellectual property rights, all these things that, of course, are still we're at the beginning, in the infancy of addressing all of this, but obviously we need to play a role it's not policing, but helping maturing the usage of AI.
Yes, they were all things that we have seen coming, but in a separate context. And now with AI, they're all coming together, from copyright to using, the common ideas and how to disseminate them and everything. So certainly, it's not something that I'm passionate about. It's not so much about project management, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, ethics and artificial intelligence. But I'm also fascinated about the flywheel model that PMI has adopted. So what can you say about it?
PMI has been a very successful organization by all means, right? We were created in 1969, but we grew 20 times in the last 20 years in terms of at least revenue. That is a measure, but it's one measure. 45% of the certifications that were granted in the last 5 years, right? So we're seeing this acceleration in our growth with some setbacks, of course, bad years, good years, but in the end, we keep growing. However, when I joined, I felt that we needed a reset in a way for a few reasons. One of them was that we had maybe expanded mentally so much that it was a little bit becoming unclear who were the people we wanted to help. So we came, I think you mentioned that before, make ideas a reality, great ambition. But we also said that our focus is now on the game changers, which is a vague definition, right? It's very loose because a lot of people could declare that they are game changers. It's aspirational, but it doesn't say exactly who we work for and who we serve. And we started to see this reflected in our offer and do a lot of things that have little to do with helping specifically project professionals. So I wanted to make sure we refocus the organization around that. And I also felt we needed to reclarify our strategy and our purpose. So purpose, we sort of touched on it before. I really think we want to be put again on the line when it comes to increasing project success, because successful projects transform the world, one project at a time, like you said, Juicy. Our strategy is more about where we want to go and what are the most important things we need to accomplish to get there. I'm not saying all the things that should be accomplished, because then we would have a bucket list of 300 things, right? But the most important ones, like really narrow down to what is really critical to us. One of them is the trust that the community has for PMI and that organizations can have in PMI to determine and assess the skills that project professionals have. You know, that notion of trust is essential. So anyway, my commitment to the organization, initially, I joined in September last year. I thought, okay, I'm going to take 90 days, set a strategy, and then just we go. But I also realized pretty quickly that PMI is a slightly different kind of organization where a lot of people feel ownership, which is great, of PMI because it's owned by the profession, literally. We have 700,000 owners, right? And plus all the other ones who may not be a member, but they still want to know what PMI is doing. And so I felt that takes more time. We need to take the right input, think this through, get alignment between the members of the executive team, which, by the way, I made a number of changes there. So I also have people who are more recent, need to learn. And together with the board of directors, get to a solid, robust alignment that then we can start discussing with our community, with our employees, with everyone to all go in the same direction. And the all go in the same direction is the concept of the flywheel, right? It's the idea that PMI is not just one thing. It's not just our courses, our certifications, not just our chapters, not just any of these components, but all of this, the academia, the corporations employing project people and running projects, NGOs, governments, our community, so that's our members, the larger profession, our chapters, the structure of the community, our volunteers, our teams, our ecosystem of training, our accredited training partners, all these components of our success need to operate together, and we should not do things with only one component involved. Like, we can't have our thought leadership team working on what they're interested in if that is not the interest of the chapters, if we don't have courses that support that or have no intent to have any involvement in that, if our network of training partners don't care, if governments don't care, that doesn't help. We can't have a focus on our chapter structure only if we don't provide guidance to the chapters about where we want to go, so that together we can achieve more, right? And the chapters are actually asking for that. Yes. So that's the concept of the flywheel. It's more an activation model. It doesn't give you the strategy, but it reminds everyone, hopefully, that not only together we can, but together we must. Otherwise, we will fail.
Together we must. Pierre, we are at the end of our time together, and would you like to say to our audience as a parting message?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me today. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk to you. The one thing I want to say is that we are surrounded with a lot of pessimism, and sometimes in Europe more than any other region in the world. But this should not overwhelm us. I think there's a new era that is opening because of the climate emergency that is very real, because of AI that is showing all its potential, but we're at the very beginning of that. This new era is our chance as a profession, and it is now. It's not like in 10 years, it's happening now. So our chance and now. So as we're entering this new era, I would like everyone to remember that growth and comfort don't go well together. I always say that if you're comfortable, you're not going to grow, or it's going to be harder to grow. So you have to, I think all of us have to sometimes get out of our comfort zone, comfort ideas, and believe strongly that success is in adaptation and reinvention. That's what I think we should try to focus on as a profession. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for your time, your candor, for being with us. It's been a pleasure.
Vi è piaciuta questa puntata? Allora non dimenticate di attivare le notifiche o di seguirci per non perdere le prossime. Inoltre, l'ascolto del podcast del PMI NIC dà diritto a 0,5 PDU nella sezione Online or Digital Media del CCRS. Noi vi aspettiamo al prossimo episodio di Project Management on the Go.